Thank you for being here and welcome back. I'm going to be reading a new story called Spirit to help you relax and fall asleep. I hope you like it. He punished her and pulled hard on the long leather strap that he attached to the leather belt around her neck. It hurt, and she tried to squeeze a finger in between her neck and the belt. She fell to the ground and heard some faint laughter. She struggled harder, gripping the belt with both hands. She was on her knees, trying to catch her breath. She could hear the muffled voices of his visitors as they watched. He towered over her, and she fought with all her force. Her short silver dress covered only a portion of her body, and it revealed all of her gorgeous skin and her muscles as they tightened in an act of resistance. Her silky, long, dark brown hair whipped back and forth as she flung her head. He released the belt strap, and she gasped for air, coughing repeatedly. Someone in the crowd cheered, and he started laughing. Then his anger turned against the governor that had touched her. He grabbed him, smashing his head against a table, breaking his nose. He kicked him. The governor's shoulder slumped, and he yelled in pain. He crouched over with one hand around his stomach and the other covering his nose, trying to stop the blood from hitting the ground. A crowd of visitors gathered around them watching. Guards rushed to drag the governor out. Moments before all this started, the dinner party was just beginning, and hundreds of visitors made up of governors and rulers arrived from all over the land. The men wore tuxedos, and the women wore formal evening gowns. The huge tables were lavishly decorated, each with a chandelier above them. And there was an endless amount of food and wine. It was full of people that knew each other, leaders, senators, governors, friends. Everyone was talking, laughing, and gossiping. The powerful emperor and great ruler of their land, Spectre, hosted the party. He could have any girl he wanted in all of his kingdom, but she was the one that was always by his side, belonged to him, and was his. There was a new governor in the land. He noticed her right away because she was beautiful. Out of all the ladies there, she caught his eye. She drew him in like a magnet. He swaggered his way over to her. He was naive and didn't know who she was. "What's your name?" he asked. "Spirit," she answered shyly. "Spirit," he said, taking her hand and kissing it. "Lovely to meet you." Spectre was only a few steps away, engaging in a fairly uninteresting conversation. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed them, and that's when he dashed over to them in a fit of rage. He punished Spirit and kicked the young new governor out of his party. The guest remained in shock for a moment, but soon after, glasses began clinking, and their mindless chatter, laughter, and dancing continued. Spirit remained close to Spectre the rest of the night. No one dared to even look at her. The music played, and a crowd gathered on the dance floor. Two very seductive young ladies approached him. One of them asked him to dance with them. while the other one pulled on his arm, leading him to the dance floor. The lights dimmed and the music got louder. One of the ladies rubbed her back against him, caressing him with her body and her curves. He wrapped his arms around her waist while swaying with her. Her friend tried to cut in between them by stroking her hand up and down his chest. One of the girls took out her phone and took a picture of them. Emperor Spectre looked straight at the camera, smiling, while the ladies were each looking at the camera, but at the same time kissing his face. When the song ended, they each thanked and hugged him. Spirit sat alone watching. There were others sitting at the long banquet table, but no one spoke to her. Spectre returned and sat next to her. He placed his hand on her leg. His fingertips touched her inner thigh. She quietly seethed with resentment, yet a jarring sensation of pleasure washed through her body. Finally, after most of the guests had retired, they went upstairs to bed. Unfortunately, Spectre was still upset about earlier. It seemed the short conversation between her and the governor had angered him more than she had imagined. "Answer me," he yelled at her, throwing a handful of books off a nearby bookshelf. She crawled into a corner and covered her face with her hands. He stomped over to her and stood in front of her, towering over her. "What did he say?" he asked, pausing after each word. He knelt and squeezed her chin, lifting it up. "He just introduced himself." Her tone was wary. "Is that all?" he said. He lifted her up with one quick jolt. He threw her on the bed, then tied her wrists with rope to the bed. She screamed and started kicking. "He'll pay for this," he whispered in her ear, then walked away. "Don't leave me here," she yelled, but he was gone. Later that night he returned. She felt his hot, firm body press against hers. He untied her wrist while kissing her. She felt a warm feeling of desire mixed with hate. She looked into his dark green eyes while massaging her tender wrists. "Thank me for untying you," he whispered. "Thank you," she said. He kissed her harder. He forced her to take her clothes off before getting in bed. The windows were open and the night air was cool. He lay in bed and forced her to stand there. He watched her as she shivered and struggled to cover her nakedness with her arms. Finally, he commanded her to get in bed. He couldn't sleep without feeling her next to him. She crawled under the covers. He grabbed her waist firmly, yanking her towards him. His strong and muscular body warmed all of her skin. She barely moved as his arm fell heavy on top of her. His hands were rough yet soft. He breathed deeper. She felt his breath on her face. Then he fell asleep instantly. The following day, she began her quotidian tasks and found enjoyment in them by listening to music. Spectre approached her. "I'm having some guests over for dinner. Will you behave?" he asked, while lifting her chin. She nodded. "Good," he smiled. "Otherwise I'll have to punish you."